Good evening and welcome to the Fairfield City School District Board of Education meeting for March 2nd, 2023. Mr. Clark, will you lead us in the pledge?
I will. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Mrs. Lane, will you call the roll, please?
Sure. Mr. Begley?
Here.
Ms. Birding?
Present.
Mr. Clark?
Present.
Mrs. Gundrum?
Here.
Mrs. Shorter? Here.
Perfect timing. Mr. Smith, presentations and resolutions. What do we have up first?
Yes, Mr. Bagley and members of the board, we have two presentations this evening. Our first presentation is in regard to our AXO program at our high school. This time, I'll turn it over to our principal, Mr. Ryan Bellamy.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Good evening, Mr. Begley, members of the board. Tonight I'm excited to introduce one of our partnerships and also showcase some of our students' many talents. Before we get to our students, I would like to introduce one of our local leaders at NAACP, Mr. Bishop Enos F. Tate. Bishop Tate has been an active member of the NAACP for the past 5 years. His commitment to helping excel and rise students to the occasion drew him to the NAACP's nationally acclaimed AXO program. Over the course of each year, students work with local volunteer instructors and mentors to develop projects, participate in enrichment opportunities, including workshops, tutorials, and field trips on specific competitions that they're in. Local AXO competitions and ceremony showcases result in students' hard work and dedication. Competition winners receive medals, prizes, and provided by local and regional sponsors and contributors. Local gold medalists advance to the national competitions and have opportunities to receive scholarships and awards provided by national sponsors. Luckily for us, at Fairfield High School, we've had many of those students receive those awards and scholarships, and we'll talk about those here in just a few minutes. Bishop Tate has also been, for the past 15 years, in the nonprofit sector. In February of 2018, he expanded his network and continued his ministry and community work under Enos Tate Ministries, also known as ETM. The mission of ETM is to advance and support local, state, and national initiatives to address cultural disparities for all people, especially African Americans. To talk a little bit more about this, I'm glad to introduce Bishop Enos Tate.
Good evening to the chair, to the members of the board, to the staff, and to the parents, and to the students. One of the most dangerous things to ever do is to give a preacher a mic. I promise I will not do a sermon tonight. But I am ecstatic and excited about the partnership that we have had for a number of years. I've only been working with the program for about three years, but the partnership with AXO and with the Fairfield School District has been ongoing for almost about 7 or 8 years. It has been a phenomenal partnership, and we are proud to say that the results from the Fairfield School District have been exciting. We can't say enough about our partnership. We can't say enough about the excellent students that we've been able to assist and to watch them grow and to excel and move to next levels in their crafts and their skill sets and the things that they've developed throughout this program. I want to take my hat off to our partner who has been my cohort for Fairfield School District, and that is Ms. Carol Nance. She's not here, but I know her spirit is here because she has done a phenomenal job of making sure that not only do we have students, but that the students are prepared and ready to compete. She's not only been an inspiration for them, but she's been a motivator, a coach, a mentor, and everything else that they've needed. AXO is now celebrating its 45th year as an organization. It is called AXO because it is the Afro-Scientific, Cultural, Technological Special Olympics or Scientific Olympics. And the reason why it was designed was to make sure that African American students were given an opportunity to compete at the highest level. We start with the local competition, and from that local competition, there is a national competition. There are 36 categories And the concept of the Olympics, if you think about the Olympics, there's a category that sometimes we don't even think about, where people are competing. But each one of those students or those participants gets an opportunity to not only be awarded a medal, but scholarships, support from national organizations, and go on to then compete at a national level, which they also receive scholarships and support from organizations. But it's a wide variety of things that are taking place on both levels, where the student gets a chance to really get a chance to explore their skill sets and build capacity. That's the key word that I want to use, build capacity. What you've done here is phenomenal. We know that the students who participate from Fairfield have not only appreciated, but have excelled in their respective trades and or competitive skill levels. And so I want to turn it back over to our principal to introduce our students, but we're going to start with my son, who was in the competition for the first time this year in the humanities category, where he wrote and composed his own song and put that in the competition. He won a gold medal here in the local competition and placed third place, or a bronze medal, in the national competition amongst about 100 of his peers. So I'm glad to present and introduce Mr. Stephen Tate, who will come tonight to perform for you his song that he wrote. I forgot the name of it. Midnight Stroll. Midnight Stroll. Midnight Stroll. Please receive Stephen Tate at this time.
Thanks, Stephen. Ms. Nance, I should have said this earlier, she unexpectedly had to head to D.C. earlier this week. Her brother was admitted to the hospital, so she had to go there to be with her family. But in her place tonight is Ms. Kylie Sweet, one of our science teachers here that has also started to take a pretty big role in our AXO program as well. So thank you, Kylie, for coming as well. Our next student is Kieran Kiganda, the 12th grade student. She's not here tonight with us, but she won gold locally last year. She went on to medal in nationals, and this year currently with that same piece of art, she is a semi-finalist for the Cincinnati Art Overture Awards. So she has already got a $1,000 scholarship and now is in the running for a $3,000 scholarship as well. And that will be named on March 25th at the Aronoff Center in the next couple weeks. So we wish her the best of luck in that as well. Our last student is a 12th grade student that won gold here locally and then went on to nationals. And that is our 12th grade senior, Stanley Browder, for spoken word.
Thank you for having me tonight. I'll be reading the essay I wrote and used last year and intend to use this year called The Sell-Out Society. Thank you. The deceitful, the desperate, and the oppressed exist everywhere. However, the cause of desperation, the form of oppression vary. These people will cheat another man who is just as oppressed as they are, if not more so. They'll pile up the bodies of their siblings and trample them, if it means they can reach the edge of the oppressor's table, so they can feast on the scraps and crumbs, betraying and killing for scraps, blood to the body set for breadcrumbs. It is impossible to think that it would be better to keep the... Is it impossible to think that it would be Is it impossible to think that it would be better to keep the oppressor from ever having the grand feast set before him in the first place? Is it impossible for the people to organize among themselves? Well, maybe it is an impossibility to consider, but only because there exists a traitor within every movement. Even if these traitors did not originally intend to work against the group, they did. They became a sellout. The sellout's treachery is ubiquitous and can be heard echoing throughout history. The sellout must be re-examined and re-understood so future movements can remove the sellout. Looking back to the founding of America, its fathers wrote a document that claimed all people had certain unalienable rights, that all people had life, liberty, and freedom. Yet these rights could not be found with poor people, women, and especially slaves. Were they not considered people? The people of this time were not so incompetent that they were unaware that these groups were all people just as much as the white landowning men were. In a short article, African Slavery in America, Thomas Paine calls into question the hypocrisy of the signers a year before the Declaration of Independence was published. He asks, how can they complain about the British attempts to enslave them, even while they have thousands in slavery and each year enslave thousands more? The framers were demagogues. They chose to listen to the rich, to the misogynist, and to the anti-black crowd, instead of listening to the ideals that were used to justify the creation of the country. This hypocrisy is quite easily reconcilable. If rights were extended to these groups, then the power of the fledgling nation would no longer be concentrated among the framers and their peers. They chose to sell out and go against America's founding ideals that they claimed they supported. They signed a document that declared the discussion of the issue of slavery must be put off for 20 years with blood-bathed quills. Slavery within Uncle Tom's Cabin is still approached with the same hypocrisy as it was during America's conception. Throughout the novel, slavery is avidly defended using violence. This book is filled with sellouts, especially regarding the topic of slavery. One of the clearest and most egregious sellouts in the novel is Augustine St. Clair, who is acutely aware of the contradiction that exists within the pro-slavery Christian population and actively denounces it. St. Clair declares that if there's a cheaper way to produce cotton and slavery fell out of favor, the church would quickly discover that everything in the Bible went against slavery, because the leaders of the church are selling out and espousing ideas tantamount to a lie in regards to the church's core tenets. St. Clair further asserts that faithful Christians ought to expend their entire being fighting this monstrous system of injustice, and thus be willing to die for its abolition. Despite St. Clair's decrying of slavery, he is a sellout similar to the Christians he denounces, as he does nothing to prevent its perpetual existence. He owns numerous slaves, whom he never frees. St. Clair fails to act in accordance with his own ideals and instead chooses to slothfully put off the slave's emancipation until the future. St. Clair's apathy shows that he's just as much of a sellout as any other apathetic abolitionist. However, at least St. Clair is passively against the practice of slavery. Simon Legree's plantation had two overseers, Quimbo and Sambo, who passively upheld the savage system of slavery. Quimbo and Sambo beat and controlled the other slaves on the plantation, yet they were dark-skinned slaves, societally considered no better than any other slaves on the plantation. Yet, when they were allowed to wield power, they sold out the race and took it. The temptation for power and wealth are often the whispers that draw a person to turn from the bright streets of progress and into the dark alleys of the past. Even with that temptation, how can a person be driven to hurt those around them for a common oppressor? The sellout can rationalize it because in that moment they no longer feel as though they are the oppressed, but rather the oppressor. So it makes sense that they would act in the interest of the people they feel are most similar to them, regardless of the reality of the situation. Quimbo and Sambo's willingness to be sellouts can be explained in part by W.E.B. Du Bois' idea of double consciousness, which he describes in his work, The Souls of Black Folk. This idea can be condensed into the basic idea that there are two warring ideals in one dark body, and that the person often prefers to maintain both parts. However, there are people entirely willing to give up their blackness and embrace the white culture's views of them in a vain attempt to achieve acceptance. This idea is found within Black Skin, White Mask, where Frantz Fanon describes the effects of the oppression of French colonial rule in Martinique. The black people subject to French rule had two warring selves, one being their black and Martiniqueness, and the other their Frenchness. Fanon describes how a plethora of people sold out to their Frenchness. The uneducated and indigent black people on the island would marry a French person to socially whiten themselves. The educated black people on the island would learn French to get an education abroad and generally appeal to the French standards, to become socially whiter. By appealing to the French, the Martinicans largely failed to strive for the ideal of freedom and instead followed the French. To this day, Martinicans are still under the thumb of the French and considered a French department. The sellout is pervasive throughout history and the present, and the list of sellouts goes on ad infinitum. Was there no greater self than Judas some 2,000 years ago? The often apotheosized 1960 civil rights movement was littered with and even led by zealots. Malcolm X's speech, Message to the Grassroots, rightly lambasted the big six civil rights leaders, Martin Luther King Jr., James Farmer, John Lewis, A. Philip Randolph, Roy Wilkins, and Whitney Young for selling out the progress of the people for $250,000 or $2,348,888 in today's money. The Big Six were paid to co-opt the March on Washington, which is a grassroots movement with 250,000 people. They are paid to feeder the people's movement. They are paid to sell out. Kennedy was scared of the uncontrolled masses in the Capitol, so he found leaders that people would be more willing to follow than their ideals. Ultimately, Kennedy's goals were realized, and the people were never permitted to cash their check for justice and freedom that America's fathers signed. These same sellout leaders exist today with different names and different faces, but they have the same willingness to sell out and stagnate burgeoning progressive movements. Malcolm X describes these sellouts by comparing them to the house slaves of America's past, who cared more about keeping their master's house from burning down than their own master did. These sellouts are in LGBTQ movements, black movements, workers' movements, and any other oppressed people's movements, where they are fighting just as hard to keep the oppressor's carefully cultivated home from collapsing. As Malcolm X proclaimed concerning these sellouts, they didn't integrate it, they infiltrated it. The sellouts' ability to mutilate movements and tear them out of their ideological framework they were nested in is the origin of the obliteration of innumerable movements. The sellouts are ultimately too pervasive to be removed, but it is entirely possible to negate their effect. The paramount principle people must cling to is to follow their ideals instead of individuals, who attempt to infiltrate ideological movements. When fighting for some cause, you cannot be led astray by the meek masters of moderation who seek to uphold the oppressive status quo. Thank you.
So this year, we're getting close to the time where students start to get their ideas and what type of category they want to jump into. So our April staff meeting, we will spend all that time actually allowing our teachers to go and allowing the students to present to our staff in different categories. They'll give them feedback to get them better prepared for the local competition. So we're excited to be part of that. And if there's anybody who'd like to come and join on that April staff meeting, you guys are more than welcome to be a part of that as well. So students, we thank you guys for presenting today. And obviously, board, we appreciate all your support with the high school and with the AXO program. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions?
Well, the AXO program itself has been a very successful program, and we've had so many first place winners at the national level from Fairfield City Schools. I have to put that out there. But it is one of those programs where kids are able to express themselves, and they seek to get help and support from the community at large to help them hone their skills. And so I'm very impressed with the program. You know, keep up the good work, continue to reach for those goals, and you'll be successful. And thank you so much for sharing your talents. And thank you, Mr. Tate, for doing what you do. And as a preacher, you did keep it, you know, you didn't go too far with it, but no, you did a good job. So thank you so much.
Anyone else?
I think it's a great opportunity to showcase talent and creativity. I used to play the piano myself. I'm very rusty at it now, but I really loved the song that you wrote, and I could totally feel the name Midnight Stroll in it. And you were such a good orator, Mr. Browder, that I was just captivated. And there are a lot of things I'm going to study more after listening to you too. So thank you all so much.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I think it's a great program, and Bishop Tate, thank you so much for your involvement in partnering with the school. We love to do that with outside organizations, and I want to thank Mrs. Nance and Ms. Sweet as well. Thank you for doing that. It's all about the students, and gentlemen, well done. Great speech, great writing, great passion in your writing too. Thank you so much for sharing that. And young Mr. Tate, I can't even play the radio, let alone a piano like that. So good job for you. My father could play by ear, but it did not pass down to me. So I'm always amazed with anyone that can play an instrument. So thank you both very much for your passion. Keep doing what you're doing. Be a leader in everything that you do. And thank you so much. Appreciate you both.
Thank you for having us.
I'm very thankful that we have such a great program and that our kids are able to have an outlet and a program they can excel in. And congratulations, gentlemen, on what you've already achieved, and I look forward to see what you guys continue to achieve with.
Thank you. Obviously, your work and effort and passion is evident in both of those performances. Keep up the good work. Bishop Tate, thank you for being a part of this and giving your time. I can tell you're a proud papa as well. As well you should be. So thank you, guys. Great job.